Hi, I'm Aysha Waja. I am the director at the Project Space in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm also an independent curator. Today I'm going to talk you through the kind of basics of funding and how to apply for funding, and also try to demystify the idea of funding. So hopefully at the end of this you're going to have better tools to apply for funding and to secure it. So there are three main aspects to funding, that is sources for funding, proposal writing, and budgeting. We're going to look at each aspect with a kind of brief overview of how to go about each aspect. There are many sources from which you can obtain funding for your project. It is important to get yourself into a network where these sources are posted. So VANSA, the Visual Arts Network of South Africa, is a great tool because they always post residency opportunities, project opportunities, calls for applications from different funders, specifically to South Africa, but then also international residency programs or projects. So types of funding. Funding for the arts can be categorized into three sections. Each category and each funder will have specific objectives and aims, and it's important to familiarize yourself with what those are, especially when writing your proposal. So you need to understand what the funder is looking for, what the project is looking for, and how you can align your project and yourself with that. This doesn't mean that you're going to compromise on what your idea is, but it just means that when the funder is reading your application, they can see that what you're trying to do fits in with what they're trying to do. Also, funders may only ask for or may only offer funding for specific things within your project. That may only be production costs, so a funder might only be looking to support the production of a project or a body of work, or they're only looking to offer support for travel costs. So if you're traveling to a residency, or you're traveling to participate in an exhibition, or you're looking to bring someone in to participate in an exhibition locally. So it's important to look at what the funder offers and also what you're looking for. The arts variety and types of funders can be put into three sections. So that is art for personal liberation, human development, and arts for its own sake. So this is kind of a personal project that you are interested in. That's your investment. So you have an idea, you want to create this amazing body of work or put together a really amazing exhibition, and you can apply to specific funders to make that happen. Those funders are public funding agencies, so the National Arts Council. In South Africa, the Department of Arts and Culture. You could even look into provisional kind of sectors within the arts. Private sector companies, so sometimes that would be an award program, so maybe APSA or SASL, or just speaking to those companies about what they are able to offer. Individual arts patrons, so certain collectors or people who buy your work, as an artist or someone who's in the arts, people who are interested in buying. Those people might also be willing to help you raise money or put together money to develop a project. And then foreign embassies. So cultural institutions and foreign embassies like the Goethe Institute or just the French Embassy, Italian Embassy. They are really beneficial when looking for travel money. So if you're trying to get a residency in Italy, you could maybe approach the Italian Embassy to say, hey, I'm looking to get there, but I don't have money. Can you help? Art for economic development. So these are aid agencies engaged in culture and development, specifically looking at social kind of cohesion. International cultural agencies engaged in cultural diversity, so like UNESCO, and its fund for cultural diversity. Foreign governments providing aid to countries in the global south. Private sector companies aligned to the creative sector, and national, provincial, and local government department. So that would be the tourism and economic development department. These kind of funders usually have specific calls for applications. So recently UNESCO had a call for applications specifically aimed at women and empowering women within interdisciplinary and digital media. So if you're working within specific types of social cohesion, or you are a female artist or part of the LGBT community, or whatever it is that you're interested in, it's important to look at funders who are aligned with similar interests. Art for social development. National government departments like the health and welfare and environment municipalities are sometimes also keen on communicating particular messages, and they look at working with artists. kind of great initiative with social cohesion is the 360 organization, which is an international organization, and they tend to work with artists a lot to communicate their ideas and messages. Usually it's graffiti artists, but I think they're open to other kinds of art as well. Provincial, regional, and local government agencies, international and local development agencies, private sector companies through their CSI programs, which are their corporate social development. So each company has a CSI program that has to benefit the community or the environment in some kind of way, and it's useful to look at what their objectives are to see if you fit into that or you can work with them in some way. And then educational institutions. Art and education are a great kind of pairing. So it's important to think about how your work can also aid education or how education can also aid your work. So below is a list of companies that offer funding. This is a suggested list of companies that are available to artists, specifically locally, but also internationally. It's also important to know that there are many more options available, and you need to do your research. And once you get into one network, it will also open you up to other networks. The last two are great travel grant funders who offer funding for traveling. So if you need that kind of funding, they're great to apply to. Next, we're going to look at proposal writing and getting your proposal together in order to obtain your funding. This is really, really important. There's no point in trying to get funding if you don't have a solid proposal together. Funders need to understand what it is that you want to achieve in your project. And so your proposal has to be clear, sometimes concise, but it has to be clear, and you have to be aware of what it is that you want to do. If you are not aware of what you want to do, they're not going to understand it. To do this, you need to indicate what you're trying to achieve, what the outcomes will be in order to get your funder to invest in you. You need to remember that a funder is investing in the project that you are proposing. They want to be involved, and you need to convince them, but they need to understand exactly what it is. So you need to understand your project in its ins and outs. So every single detail that your project composes of. So whether it is from the kind of negotiating or meeting with an artist and conceptualizing an idea, to the production, to travel costs that may be incurred, to hosting a lunch or anything. Whatever your project composes of, it needs to be listed in your proposal and in your budget and your project plan. This leads us into the phases of any project. So that would be the planning of the project, the implementation. So that would be the production and the realization of the project, and then the documentation and evaluation. Documentation and evaluation may be sometimes seen as an afterthought to your project, but they're critical components to it. In order to attain funding, you need to report on it at the end of it. Every single funder requires a report for every project. This helps them know that their money has been used in the way that it was asked for and that it has had an impact. So it is really important to document what that project is. And documentation could be photography or video or just getting a survey done from participants. And then evaluation at the end, where you evaluate what the project has achieved. Most funders have their own templates for proposals. They usually have a list of guidelines, or they ask you specific questions where you list what your aims and what your objectives are, where they ask you for a brief. Depending on what they're looking for, those will differ. But it is important to always understand what their aims and what their objectives are and what their interests are as well. And this will help guide your process of writing your proposal and defining it, and also understanding what it is that you want to achieve. Components of the proposal. So each proposal will have a series of components. These are the basic components for each proposal, the kind of must-haves in each proposal that you need to do. It also helps you kind of clearly define what you're going to do and think through that process. So when you're actually implementing your project, you already have an idea of what stage you need to be in or what the stages are. So the title page, so this is just the kind of introduction to your proposal. It has the title of your project, which could be anything. I can't think of anything right now. So the title of your project, your name and your contact details. These are really important because funders need to be able to get hold of you. The template might ask you for those things anyway, but it's also just important to put it out there. And then any information on partners and other funders. So if you're applying for funding for a project, but you already have funding for a specific part, it's just important to note that somewhere on the title page. It could just be in partnership with whatever, or I have funding from these already. The summary page. So the summary is a kind of brief section which introduces what your idea is, the objectives, the aims. It's a teaser in a way. It kind of entices the funder into the project, and they're able to see from that your project aligns with them, and it gets them interested in it. So then they look into the details of the project. So this usually includes a brief introduction, your expected outcomes, and then the resources that you require from the funder. Sometimes a funder will require a letter of intent or inquiry before submitting a full proposal. It's kind of like a pre-selection. So yeah, it helps them kind of identify what it is that you are offering and whether they're able to assist you. So the letter of intent needs to comprise of the following things. So the purpose of the funding and the project outcome, what it's for, the target beneficiary, so people who will benefit from the project, people who are being involved. This includes yourself and other artists or the audience that you're trying to engage with. The fit between yourself and the funder, so how you align your project with the funder or how you align your practice with the funder and what their aims are. The experience that you have and the funding acquired to use this project. So any experiences you've had with funding or with other previous projects. And then what you require for the specific project in terms of funding and resources. The next step is to include the background. It's always important to give a context to what your proposal is, why you're doing this project, where it's coming from. And this might be, it's an idea that stemmed from a previous body of work, and this is where you're at now and what you want it to be in the future. And this is the kind of process to get it there. Funders don't always know every artist. They're not always familiar with the art or the way that artists work. So it's important to have a bit of background for your project, kind of previous history of what you've done. It doesn't have to be too long, and you can always include like a link to a website or other projects. Background and context is important for the funder because you're not just proposing an idea, you're proposing a project. And you have, as an artist, you have experience. You've done either similar projects or you've created a body of work at some point. You've practiced as an artist. So it's not an idea. It's a project, it's a body of work. It's something that's been done before in some way. It might not necessarily be this idea, but you have experience. So funders need to know that. They need to understand that you have the ability to create something. And what you're proposing is not just an idea. It's not just a concept, but it is something that is going to materialize. You also need to clearly, so to do this, you need to clearly outline the challenges that you expect to face within this. No project is easily attained, and you need to also be aware of what those challenges may be. And then also in individuals and organizations that you may want to partner with. Partnership is really important to make projects happen. So the next step is goals and objectives. In this section, you need to clearly define what your goals and objectives are, so what you're aiming to achieve through the project, as well as the outcomes and impact of the project. So at the end of it, what will happen and how would it have impacted the community around you or your project or your practice. A great tip for the goals and objectives is to align it or to see how it can be aligned with the objectives of the funder. So for example, if the funder is looking for a project that increases awareness around HIV and AIDS, then how does your project as a performance or an artwork speak to HIV and AIDS awareness or the experiences by people who have HIV and AIDS? The next step is to speak about yourself as an artist or a collective. So just to give a brief bio and also your CV and maybe an artist statement, just so that the funder knows who you are and where you're coming from and things you've done in the past and can see the experience that you have as a creative person. You then need to create a project plan for your project. This will help you create a timeline and a process of how the project will be achieved. And your project plan needs to include and also consider the following things. That being project development, so how your project is developed across a certain timeline, the research that has gone into the project, the time it would take or aspects for creating the work, so whether it's drawing, sculpture, photography, printing and framing, so if you're printing photographs, but then also timing allocated for framing of the works. Preparation of the gallery, so organizing a gallery space, going to view the gallery space, then the installation of the exhibition. You could include a media day, so a day where you invite media to come and see the exhibition, but you should also consider media and marketing throughout the process of your project. And then obviously the opening of the exhibition, a walkabout, a talk or presentation that you want to have as part of the program, the closing of the exhibition, so when it ends, if you want to have a closing event or not, and then finally the report preparation. So you prepare a report, you report on the entire experience of the project and the process of realizing it, and then you submit your report to the funder. So an example of an activity plan with a start and end date. So your project development, so the kind of conceptual development of your project could be over a month where you think through the process. So it could start at the beginning of a month, so say the 2nd of January to the end around the 28th. You may allocate time for research to research your idea further. That could also be a period of a few weeks to a month, and then you allocate time accordingly the next month for starting the production of the work. Depending on what kind of work you're making, the production period may be longer. So it could be a month to 2 months or 6 months. In that time, you may include certain marketing timelines and then also time to find a gallery space, to view the gallery space, and to kind of evaluate what installation requirements you would need and whether you would need assistance with installation. You then need to include the day, the timeline for installing the exhibition, so whether it's a week or a day or two, depending on the size of the project, and also what the gallery's requirements are. The opening day, and then time for walkabouts, and so forth. Also included in your proposal should be staffing and resources. This section introduces the team that you're involved with, so yourself as the artist or the project manager or facilitator, any assistance you require. So if you have a marketing assistant, an artist assistant who's helping you produce the work, a photographer who's documenting your work and your process, or a videographer, an installation team that will help you install the work. It also includes in-kind resources. So if on the opening night, a friend of yours is bartending for the opening, that is also a resource that needs to be included, whether it's paid for or not. It also includes any equipment that may be used in realizing the project. So if you don't have specific photography equipment, how you acquire that equipment and from whom also needs to be included in the proposal. The next and almost final step is to create a budget for your project. A great way to do this is to refer to your activity plan and then list each item in your budget that would incur a cost. So anything that can be seen as an expense. Start by listing each item as a line item and make sure to include things like materials, studio rental or venue rental for a gallery, project facilitation as an artist or a facilitator or curator of a project. This fee goes towards you and kind of almost like a salary that you incur for managing the project and completing the project. It's also important to include donations, so any in-kind donations or donations from other patrons or funders that are going towards the support of this project. So these include monetary and in-kind. Again, example, if a friend is bartending for free or if you know someone who's a photographer who's helping you out. These help the funder realize that you are actually looking at other ways of funding, and it would encourage them to support you because it shows that you're proactive and you are dedicated to making this project a reality. Calculate how much of each expenditure item will be required. So how many quantities or over how many months and what that cost would be. The best way to do this is probably in an Excel spreadsheet. If you're not familiar with Excel, create a table format. Excel is great because it has a tool that will help you calculate each item and work out percentages if need be. So create a table. Start with the item that you are going to list the cost for. So if that's studio rental, the item will be studio. Then the quantity or number of units. That could be calculated in weeks, days, or months. So either it'd be 1, and then how many weeks that you need. So say you need it for 3 weeks, 1, and then the next column would be 3. Description would be exactly what it is, and then the amount that you need. So perhaps your studio costs you 2,000 Rand or more, and then a total for how much that total is for that line item. Once you've listed each line item, you calculate the total of what the budget would be, and that is your total budget. In the description, you can also include whether you're asking for that funder for funding for that item, or whether it's an in-kind donation or it's been supported by another funder. There are great online tools which can help you estimate the cost for things like stipends or facilitator fees. If you look at kind of freelance rates for creatives, or what a general kind of idea of that rate would be. If you are doing a project that requires a per diem for an artist or someone that's assisting you on the project, Numbeo, so that's Numbeo, is a great tool that can help you identify what the cost of living for a person would be on a day-to-day basis. And that is applicable to any country in the world. So if you're applying to a program internationally and you need to raise support for a daily stipend or material stipend or just a general kind of estimation of a living cost, it is a great tool to help you out with that. Again, align your budget to the activity plan. It helps you get a better view of your project, and if you've missed anything along the way, you can always edit in. The last step is to get someone to check your proposal. Always, always, always get a friend or another creative or someone in your family who isn't even in the arts to double check to make sure that there aren't any spelling errors and to make sure that the entire proposal makes sense. This applies to reporting as well. Once you've completed your report, get someone else just to double check it, to read through it, to make sure that it makes sense and it's a good proposal and evaluation before you submit it. And that is it. I hope that this has helped in some way and that you feel less intimidated by funding or applying for funding and projects. It can be challenging, but it's always important to keep at it and to keep trying. Even if your project or your application isn't always accepted, the idea is to keep going at it and to keep trying. The more you do it, the more people get to know who you are, what you're doing, and what your projects are about. And eventually, you will get something right.